Hello, peace to everybody watching. My name is Cephas Tervius, and it's a good day to be alive. Beautiful day. That's not the Sabbath, of course. But something was on my mind because regardless of who you are, regardless of the National Geographic, like where you're located, or the people you're around, or your level of income that you receive in the home, like regardless of who you are and your circumstances are, we all have to experience patience. And what I mean by that is that something is going to have us to have to wait. Sometimes the answer isn't right before us. That's something to realize. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper within ourselves to go the extra mile in things that we're experiencing. Whether it be hardship. Okay, making sure that was right. Whether it be hardship, or in most cases it is hardship. But when you're going through all that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end. And then you can also put it in the perspective of, how you deal with one another. Patience can play a role in that also, because it can prevent you from having a situation that they may have provoked, but you can allow it to simmer down. You can take all that heat that's just put in your hands, and the person may be expecting you to retaliate with that same level of intensity, but you could kill it. Why? Because you had patience and you decided to wait and think before you thought. We're going to read that. But patience is a principal thing. We need it in order to get through our daily life. If we don't have that and we decide to be impatient, then we're destroying ourselves. Because, the saying goes, good things come to those who wait. And it's the same thing with the Lord. In this life that we're living. If we do this right and we be patient and we endure, good things will come. And I'm not talking about being rich, like, we're waiting for a check in the mail. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being able to overcome the troubles that we have. Sometimes the answer isn't having $1 million in the bank account. Money can't buy happiness. Money cannot buy your salvation. But the Lord has always expected us to endure. To be patient is another form of enduring. Because there's something greater at the other end of the tunnel. But let's get into it. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 7. That's going to be our opening scripture. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. This isn't going to be a long lesson. Just a couple scriptures, really. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. I'm going to pick it up at verse 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. I'm going to read 2 verses here. I'm going to pick it up at verse 8. Oh, I'm sorry. Verses... Oh, I'm looking at the wrong chapter. That's why I'm confused. Oh, yes. Verses 8 and 9. But it reads... in Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 8, and it says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. See, in perspective of, for example, people going to school, which is, I'm a college student myself, but when you first get into school, you're at an entry level, You have to take your core classes again. It feels routine because you just took these courses in high school. So it feels routine, nothing special. But then as you get into your more intermediate classes, hey, you may be able to, partake in an internship. Something that gets you more involved in the field that you're studying for. And then ultimately the end result, you get your degree. Now you can get a career in the field that you studied for. See, you don't get the degree once you first enroll into the school. No, you're going to be tried. You're going to be tested. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to be patient and endure that full ride before they say, okay, you can be a chemist, or you're ready to be a chiropractor, or hey, now you can prescribe medication. But better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. Because even when you have vegetation, you have to sit there and plant the seed, put in all that work, water it on a daily basis before you can get the crop, the end result. We can't expect things, the good, to just fall into our hands right at the beginning. No, it's something we have to work towards. And not just in a physical aspect, but also in a spiritual. Because it says also here, it says in verse 8, I'm going to reread it. It says, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit than the proud in spirit. Some of us may have been proud, some more than others. But ultimately, the end result is for us to be patient, not to be so quick to react or to talk or to make a move, but to be able to take a step back and think. Let God into the equation. Really, what you're doing there is because you're taking a step back and you're thinking to yourself, how do I respond to the situation? And ultimately, how would Jesus respond to the situation? Now you're being patient in the spirit, then proud in the spirit. So, just like I said in the college experience, they're not going to let, someone who hasn't been in college, hasn't taken the proper, testings and so forth, and give them the clipboard and say, hey, go diagnose this patient. No, they're going to go to the person who's been in med school, who's experienced, that got their doctorates and so forth, but we have to put in the time in order to receive these things. And that also plays a role in you getting everlasting life. That also plays a role in your day-to-day life. Like, for example, when you're trying to get your bills paid, hey, you have to endure that week. You have to go in and go clock. If you have an hourly wage job, or you have, a job you have to clock in, you have to go and put in the work and endure it. And then at the end, you receive a paycheck. But you were patient and waited for that. You were willing to put in the work in order to receive it. Peace. And it says in verse 9, it says, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Now, anger is something that man as a whole, we need to get into subjection. We need to learn how to better control it. Because even in the scriptures it says, be angry and sin not. I'm not saying that you'll never be angry again in your life, but you have to control your emotion. Now, it may not happen overnight, but after you are put to the test, because God is going to put you to the test. If you want God to be molding you, if you want this book to be transforming you, hey, opportunity will come. Once you start seeking the Lord, once you want to be living the life that God has set for us, you're going to experience something. And fortunately, the Lord is going to put you around those that are experiencing troubles themselves. Because none of us are ready to be amongst God physically. Like when He returns, none of us are ready for that. So what He has to do is change this carnal mentality that we have and put it on a spiritual state of mind. And none of us start in the spiritual state of mind. Why? Because we were living in this world. But as we continue to allow God to mold us, what He's going to do is build our patience. Because ultimately, we're learning we can depend on the Lord. He controls it all. So once some form of trouble comes our way, we don't have to be hasty in the spirit. We don't have to panic and try to put everything in our own hands. No, we stay still and we be patient and realize that God controls us. So hey, I'm gonna see how things pan out. You're gonna keep doing what you do. Like, hey, you got a job, keep going to work, and so forth. But you're gonna be patient and let God take control. That's why it says, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. And like I said, if you're dealing with an individual, this also can play a role. Because, hey, we don't wrestle with flesh and blood. That's what the Bible says. We don't wrestle with flesh and blood. What do? We're dealing with spiritual wickedness in higher places. So when someone comes to you talking that mess, think about the spirit behind that. I'm not saying, they're being controlled by demons, but hey, sometimes people say things that may rub you the wrong way. But what are you going to do? Are you going to be angry? Or are you going to be patient in the spirit? Because right here it's saying, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. If you're so quick to get angry and lash out and, react before you think, that's the category the Lord puts you in. He says that anger resteth in the bosom of fools. That's how He sees you if you can't get it in control. Or if you're not trying. Because that's what we need to be doing. We need to be changing. But that also requires patience. But let's go over to our next scripture. Psalms chapter 27. Like I said, we don't have a lot that we're going to be discussing. Psalms chapter 27. We're going to pick it up at we're going to read one verse here. Psalms chapter 27, verse 14. And it says, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and He shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Now, sometimes it may feel like, hey, no matter how hard I try, things are not going my way. But within those situations, we may not see the light at the other end of the tunnel. But who created that tunnel? God did. The Lord did not, build you up in order for you to fail. That's what we lose sight of. Whenever things aren't going our way, we're so quick to tense up and start panicking. Like when Peter, when the disciples were in a boat and Jesus was walking on water, and Peter saw Jesus and he said, okay, well, can I go up there? Jesus said, come. Peter began walking. And once he started to walk, hey, he was really walking on water just as Jesus did. But what did he do? Shortly after, he started panicking. And what happened? He started to sink. That faith that we have goes right out the window for us sometimes. And we just give up. But we can't. See, when you begin to be patient, we realize that, hey, if all I can do is depend on God, because God will do it. He'll put us in situations where there's nowhere we can go other than calling on Him. Because sometimes we feel like everything is in our control. And that, hey, I have these possessions in my life. I have this, I have that. I gave it to myself. But in reality, God gave it to you. If we're not going to give Him the glory, hey, He's going to make you realize, hey, He's going to bring you down for you to realize that you ain't doing nothing. And that's the reality of it. So, when God is bringing you through these trials and tribulations, He's showing you His hand. He's showing you that regardless of what you experience, I'm here. And we're going to learn about an individual, Joseph, later. How, regardless of what he experienced, God was there in the midst of it. And we may not be the richest people on earth. You know, some of us may not be the richest people on earth. But we're being programmed to believe that we're supposed to be expecting some form of prosperity. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having money, but that may not always be the case for all of us. But in the midst of our trials, we fail to realize that, hey, we got food on the table. We got clothes on our backs. We have a roof over our head, gas in the tank, bills being paid, and we overlook those things because we're lusting after other materialistic things. But the Lord has been preserving you. But you need to realize, hey, I need to have some patience. Because in the midst of, hey, I may not be doing as good as I have been in the past, but at the same time, the Lord is bringing you on by. And we may be in a tight spot right now, but something's going to give. But what do we have to do? We have to wait on the Lord and be of good courage. That's what we have to do. That even though it may not be looking like things are going the way we want it to, hey, the Lord brought us through it in the past. I'm just waiting to see how he's going to do it again, because we're being of good courage. The Lord has always been there, and he's not going to forsake us. So we can't be so quick to drop the ball. Be so quick to lose our faith. Because through these tribulations, we have to be patient. And this is an opportunity to build our faith. But it says, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. So if you need the strength, the Lord will give it to you. But you have to be willing to endure. If you're not going to be willing to endure, then what can God do for you? Because he's looking for the faithful. And if you're going to say you have faith in Jesus, then you have to be patient. So let's turn over to Proverbs chapter 14. Because there's many aspects of looking at what it means to be patient. We can do it in our day-to-day life. It can also mean how we're working out our salvation. Because ultimately we need to be getting these new bodies. But we don't see it yet. We got to wait until the coming of the Lord for that. And that's a form of patience that we're waiting for. And then also, how we deal with people on a day-to-day basis. Let's turn over to Proverbs chapter 14. Because that requires patience also. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 29. And it reads, he that is slow to wrath is of great understanding. So there's a wisdom behind you being slow to wrath. You're not going to be so quick to lash out at individuals or talk ill of someone, and just let your tongue, have a mind of its own. Because even the scripture says life and death are in the tongue. You can't control this thing. We'd be so quick to talk ill of people. But that's not being an ambassador of Christ. That's not showing to those around you that you are a disciple of Jesus, that you follow Christ. But once you start dealing with the word, you realize you have to change that. Actually, I'm going to go over to something. Let's see if I can find it. First Peter. I have to come back to it because I don't want to get too off track, but like I said, Proverbs 14 and verse 29, it says, he that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty in spirit exalteth folly. If you're going to be hasty in spirit. And hasty means to be impatient, to be so quick to move. If you do that, then you're exalting folly. And the exalt means to bring on high or to give praise to it. But that's what you're exemplifying. You don't mind folly. And that's contrary to God. But let's turn over to the next thing right here. Because we're going to look. Hold on. Please, hold on. We're going to look at the example I wanted to give, which is Joseph. Because we all experience something. We all do. We're going to pick it up at Genesis chapter 37. But it doesn't mean that it's the end. We can't just give up. And the Bible gives us these examples. You know, it's cool every now and then that a pastor gives you an example of his life. But the Bible can talk for itself. The Bible gives you examples. All these characters in the book, these were real people. Experienced real troubles. Nothing different from you and I today. So when we can look at what they experienced, we can look at ourselves and be like, man, it ain't that bad. You know, or I'll be okay. Hey, if he can get through it, I can too. If he's worshiping the same God that I worship, just as the Lord is taking care of him, the Lord will take care of me also. But that requires patience. That requires patience. Because we got to be willing to endure what comes our way. We're gonna do a little reading about the story of Joseph. I'm going to pick it up at Genesis chapter 37. I'm going to pick it up at verse 3. Joseph chapter 37 and verse 3. And it reads, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. Now when it says Israel, he's talking about Jacob. The Bible's talking about Jacob. Because Jacob's name is interchangeable between between Jacob and Israel. That's how, you know, Jacob had 12 sons, but then you also see the 12 sons of Jacob or the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 sons of Israel, because it's interchangeable. That's another name for Jacob. But it says, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. So, right off the bat, we see that Jacob favored Joseph. And that was probably, I think, at this time, one of his youngest sons. Or his youngest son. I want to say that. But I'm not going to. I want to say that was his youngest son at that point. So much so, he favored Joseph so much that he even made him a coat of colors. But in verse 4 it says, And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So right off the bat, we see this controversy, a conflict between Joseph and his brothers. Now, sometimes you may be experiencing things that you have no control over. Sometimes things happen to you, or some people may feel a certain way towards you, and you didn't do anything to deserve it. But we may still have to bite the bullet and continue along and still be servants of God. And sometimes it may come out in a negative outcome or a positive outcome. And in Joseph's case, it was not always a positive outcome. We're going to see that right now. But in verse 5 it says, And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. Now in Joseph's dream, he basically said, it showed that his other brothers would be in obedience to him. I'm not going to go over the dream, because I'm not trying to have y'all here for 3 years reading all this. But in his dream, his brothers were bowing down to Joseph. And even in verse 8 it says, And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. Now the dream came from God. And all Joseph was doing was relaying to them what took place in the dream. A dream that came from God. Now if God is going to make something happen, there's no way around it. There's no way you can get around what God is going to set into order. But this is a dream that God gave to Joseph. And in the dream, his brothers were going to be bowing down to Joseph. And afterwards, he dreamed another dream. And this time, he showed it to all his family. And it showed that his entire family would, basically would obey or bow down to him. That's why in verse, I'll just read it. In verse 9 it says, "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth?" So in this dream, you see 11 stars, the sun and the moon. The sun representing Jacob the father, the moon representing his wife, and then the 11 stars representing the other 11 sons. Now, you see this, and the interpretation was that all of them would be bowing down to Joseph, the youngest son. And because of this dream, his brothers hated him even more. Some people may not like you, but you just gotta experience that. You gotta bite the bullet, take it for what it is, and you can't let that overcome the walk that you have, the integrity and character that you display. You can't let that change your demeanor. You can't let it change you, and for you to react in a negative way. So they hated him so much. And in verse 13 it says, "So after the dream, his sons were out dealing with the flock. And in verse 13 it says, And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I." So now, as Jacob's sons are dealing with the flock in an area, Jacob decides to send Joseph to his other brothers. Now, Joseph has no beef with his brothers. Like, he has no issue with them. It's the other way around. Their brothers have an issue with him. But let's keep going. In verse 18, it says, "And when they saw him afar off," so his brothers saw him, and it says, "And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him." Wow. So, just from the dream and so forth, now his brothers hate him so much that they're even trying to plot a way to kill him. It says in verse 18, they conspired against him to slay him. In verse 19 it said, "They said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh." You see the type of language, the attitude they have towards their youngest brother? "Behold, this dreamer cometh." Like, it wasn't a positive connotation. No, it was negative how they meant it. They do not like him. They want the worst for him. And sometimes we may feel like those around us, that could be a trial within itself, how we deal with one another. Some people may not like you and want the worst for you. But what are we going to take the action upon ourselves, or are we going to let God deal with the matter? Let's see how Joseph decided to respond. And let's also see what else Joseph had to deal with on top of the hatred his brothers had for him. So, in verse 21 it says, "And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not kill him." So Reuben, the oldest one, had some more sense than the others. He said, you know what? Let's not kill him. Let's not kill him. In verse 22 it says, "And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again." So he didn't want to kill him. Instead, he's just like, you know what? Why don't we just put him in this pit elsewhere? far off instead. Let's do that instead of rather trying to kill him. See, Joseph has this all coming his way. He doesn't even know it. Just like we may have some trouble coming our way and we don't even know it. But guess what? When the trouble comes, we got to deal with it. We got to experience it. We got to endure it. But does that mean we pitch a fit and get mad at God and say, hey, why? God's no good. I'm mad at God, because this and this happened in my life and he allowed it to happen. He's not a good God at all. Is that how we're going to react? Or are we going to be patient and allow God to turn all things, good and bad, which we're going to learn, good and bad things come for the greater good in the end. But we're going to see that with Joseph. But this requires you to be patient. We can rejoice in the good times, but the Bible also tells us to rejoice in the tribulations also. Because good is going to come out of that also, but ultimately the Lord, He's building something within you. He's changing you. Because if nothing bad happens in your life, you just stay the same. He's getting you out of your comfort zone and molding you, causing you to change the way you think, causing you to, be more appreciative of things and so forth. But this all requires a level of patience to be willing and wanting to endure what trouble comes your way. But, so, they decided to put him in a pit. And 23 says, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into the pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. So they took the coat off of him. Now that's grimy. His dad gave him that coat, but they's like, nah, you don't even get that. We're gonna take that off of you. We're gonna put you in this pit. In 25 it says, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hands be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. So they went from trying to kill him to decide, okay, we're just going to put him to the pit. But now they're going to sell him off to Egypt. Or they're going to sell him off to the Ishmaelites. But from then on, in verse 20, it says, Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, I don't want to be sold, but I feel like at least I'm worth more than 20 pieces. Really, they were just trying to get rid of this dude. They wanted him gone. They didn't want to see his face anymore. So guess what? Go. Just 20 pieces. Take him. Bye. Thank you. Good riddance. Now look at all this Joseph has experienced. And for what? For nothing. All of this Joseph is experiencing, and he didn't do anything to deserve it. Now, there's a lot of hell that we experience in our lives that we brought upon ourselves. And we're so quick to give up and not want to go through it. But look at him. Think about it. We'll be okay. So, Joseph, just all of a sudden out of nowhere, now he's being sold into Egypt. But one thing we have to realize within ourselves is that regardless of what we're experiencing, God is always there. That's where we're going to turn over to chapter 5. No, I'm sorry, chapter 39. 2 chapters over. Because Joseph just got sent into Egypt and sold off. And now in verse 39, chapter 39, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. And it says, And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. So he got sold to the Ishmaelites. Now he's being sold off to the officer of Pharaoh. But guess what? In the midst of all this trouble, guess what? Verse 2, it says, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Can we realize that within our lives? No matter how much the trouble we go through, God is in there. He was with Joseph. And hey, we may not be prosperous, but we got what we need to go by, to carry on, to make it through. Can we not give God the glory for that? Sometimes, having the 26-inch rims on the car isn't the answer to your happiness. But the Lord is molding you and changing you, transforming you through these tribulations, because they have to come. But at the same time, he's getting you through it. We're so quick to say, hey, Lord, take me out of it, instead of saying, Lord, get me through it. Because if he just takes us out of it, what are we going to learn? How are we going to do better? How are we going to experience what we need to experience in order to think like God? Because that's what's being done to us. Just like, the potters. What do? They take the clay, which is at first dirt, and they put it with water, beat it in, turn it into clay. Then they mold it into the sculpture that they want, or the vase or the pot or whatever. Then what do? Lastly, they put it in the fire. Just like us, we need to be tried. We need to be put in the fire in order to get the glazy touch that like the finished product. He's trying to bring us into the finished product. But in order to do that, we need to get through it, not be taken out of it. And that's what Joseph has experienced right now. He's going through it. So I'm going to pick it up at verse 2 again. It says, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Verse 3, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So, even in the issues that he was facing, I'll talk to you about that later. But it says, the master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So, regardless of the situation, God was still bringing him through. Not only that, but the Lord even did a little extra for Joseph, that those around him could see that everything put in Joseph's hand was prospering. Verse 4 says, and Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. Man, Joseph went from being hated by his brothers, almost being killed, being stripped of the coat that his father gave him, being stripped by his own brothers, his flesh and blood, thrown into a pit, and then sold to some merchants to become a servant in Egypt. Being a servant in Egypt, now he's seeing some form of good coming out. He's starting to see the end of the tunnel. And now he's being overseer over his house and all that he had put into his hand. You can see his life getting better bit by bit, even though he just experienced such trouble at first. Let's keep going. Because even for us, we may see things start getting better, but then boom, another trouble or devastation comes into our life. We're like, oh, it's over now. It's over. I just got done dealing with this, and now this is coming into my life. It's over. But is that how Joseph reacts? Let's see how Joseph is while he's experiencing this. So, pick it up at verse 5. It says, and it came to pass that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had. And the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sakes. Because Joseph was, dealing with God. Hey, God even decided to bless Pharaoh's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. But let's jump down to verse 7. So Joseph is starting to see a little bit of a breakthrough. But now, in verse 7, it says, "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, Lie with me." So after all this, now he's getting another form of temptation. Not saying that he's going for it or this is something he's lusting after, but just another form of little tribulation coming out his way. Because, as you know, Joseph isn't going to go for it. But this woman keeps coming to him. That's what we're going to read. So it says, "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me, wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand." So this man put everything that he owns in the hand of Joseph. Like, he can deal with everything. Like, he has his trust in Joseph. But in verse 9 it says, "There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife." So everything this man owns, he's put in the trust of Joseph. But he's saying, I can deal with everything, but I'm not going to mess with you. You're my master's wife. And it says, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And what sin would he have been committing? Adultery. Sleeping with another man's wife. And we see this before Moses came into the scene, right? So the law didn't start with Moses. He brought it, with him now it's getting written down so it can get to the whole world. But there was an understanding of what's right and what's wrong. And it's always been the same standards, these laws, statutes, and commandments. But it says, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her to lie by her or to be with her. So this woman was persistent with it. She would not quit. She was trying to get Joseph, but Joseph kept denying. Let's keep going. So let's jump down to verse 12, and it says, "And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out." So this woman was trying her hardest to get at Joseph, but he ended up running away. Not many guys will do that. But this is a man of God right here. And he knows, like, is bigger than you sinning against this man. He's saying he's sinning against God if he did it. That's something we need to pay attention to. And he had enough, integrity and faith in God that he ain't going to, and love for God and fear of God. Think about that. Fear. He had enough fear for God that he wasn't going to commit this great wickedness or this sin against him. And it says, verse 13, "It came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice." So now Joseph was just starting to get off good again. He was just a servant not too long ago. Well, after a while, he was a servant for a while, being sold off, and then now he's his master's right hand man, and then now his master's wife is trying to sleep with him, and he keeps denying it, and then it gets to the point where she gets a hold of his coat, and now she's lying on him. She's lying on him, and then there's nothing good that's going to come out of that. Well, you see what he's experiencing? And the little things, I'm not saying all of us go through little things, because we go through some major things also. But look at what he is dealing with, and well, we're going to learn that his faith will not shake, and he's going to continue to be patient. Because like his mentality and what our mentality is, listen, God controls it all. Whatever comes our way, we'll be all right. Because the Lord, listen, the righteous will never be forsaken, and the Lord is always going to take care of us. If we're in a rut right now, we're not going to stay there. What he was dealing with his brothers, and being sold off and so forth, being a servant, he didn't stay there. He got out of it. And we may go through another thing, but guess what? We're going to get out of it too. It's just hurdles. We're meant to go over them. But let's keep going. In verse 15 it says, "And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out." So now she's saying that when she started to scream, that's when he decided to run away. She's basically twisting the story and making him the bad guy in the scenario. In verse 17 it says, "And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came." Sorry, I just skipped a verse. But let's jump down to verse 19. It says, "And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled." So now, not only does she tell the men of the house, now she's telling her husband, hey, your servant, this Hebrew guy, now keep in mind there's a difference between the Egyptians and the Hebrew, and now she's trying to belittle this man, talk ill of him, and say, this Hebrew over here, like it wasn't no positive, form of addressing him. It was a negative manner. He said, this Hebrew over here, like the Hebrew's lower than them. That's what she's getting at. So she's like, but yeah, in verse 19 it says, "And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled." Now she got Pharaoh, she got his master heated up. So this is how his master is going to respond to Joseph. Now keep in mind, Joseph did nothing wrong. She lied on him. And guess what? In verse 20 it says, "And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoner were bound, and he was there in the prison." So Joseph didn't do anything wrong, and now he's in prison for doing nothing. For saying, listen, I don't want to sleep with you because that'd be going against my God. Not only that, but that's dishonoring my master, because you're his wife. And now he's in prison. It looked like it was getting good for him, but now he's experiencing something even worse than he was beforehand. Like I said, for us, we may be experiencing something. It may get a little better for us, but hey, if something else comes our way, we can't waver. We can't give up. We can't be scared. What did we read in Psalms chapter 27? It says, "Wait on the Lord and be of good courage." And that's what Joseph's going to do here. He's going to be of good courage, and that's what we have to do also. We have to be of good courage when we're waiting on the Lord, because God controls it all. And he's going to get us through what we're experiencing. So we rejoice. And we should be having the mentality, well, God, you got this. I know you got something in mind. You're going to get me out of this, right? Bet. I'm waiting on it. Wait on the Lord and be of good courage. This patience is a principal thing. So if you don't have patience, you won't be able to see the hand of the Lord get you out of the troubles that you're experiencing. But let's keep going. Let's keep reading about this Joseph. 39, 19. But okay. Verse 21, it says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy." So even though he was experiencing what he was going through, hey, just like the Lord was with him when he was sold into Egypt, the Lord is still with him when he's going into prison. The Lord never went anywhere. So just like the Lord got you through your last troubles and tribulations, he's going to get you through the next, and the one after that, and the one after that. He's not going anywhere. So be still. Be patient. Wait on him. Don't be so quick to lose your mind over the things going on in your life. Take a step back and wait on the Lord and be patient. But yeah, verse 21 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." Verse 23, "The keeper of the prison looked not at anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper." But let's go over to the next chapter, Genesis chapter 40. We're going to pick it up at verse 1. And it says, "And it came to pass after these things, that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt, and Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound." So a little background information we're getting here. So Pharaoh was angry with his chief baker and chief butler, and he put them in the same ward that Joseph was in. So let's see the interaction or conversation between them and Joseph. Let's jump down to verse 5. And it says, "And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of this dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which was bound in the prison." So both of these individuals now both have a dream. So now Joseph is going to interpret these dreams for them and let them know what these dreams mean. Let's jump down to verse 9. And it says, "And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of the 3 branches." Oh, this is the interpretation of it. So now Joseph is interpreting the dream. And it says, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine hand and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler." So based off the butler's dream, he's going to go back to his former status, being, chief butler and so forth. He's going to go back to serving the Pharaoh, and he's going to be straight. Even though he was in prison for this time being, he's going to be straight after 3 days. In verse 14 it says, "But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." So, Joseph's trying to be real with him, listen, I was stolen out of my land, and I was put in here. I didn't do nothing wrong. In reality, he really did it. He's in here because he didn't want to sleep with Pharaoh's wife. And in reality, he's in trouble for doing the right thing. So sometimes we may think, you know what? I did the right thing, and there's a consequence behind it. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and do bad. Or sometimes we feel like we should do the wrong thing because doing the right thing may single us out or get us in even more trouble. But in reality, it ain't between you and that individual. God is seeing all this. So what did Joseph decide to do? He continued to do the right thing. And that's what you should be doing also. Hey, we got to experience, some form of trouble for doing the right thing sometimes, because this world is contrary to God. And the Lord is the right way. God is righteous. He's holy. He's perfect. The world is wickedness. So sometimes when you do the right thing, there may be a consequence behind it. But hey, you're standing for your faith in Jesus. You're standing in the belief of Jesus, saying, hey, he wants me to be right, so I'm going to be right like he was. But we gotta experience that. And we gotta bite the bullet. We can't get mad. We're going to be patient. Because hey, just even if we experience the trouble, the Lord will get us out of it. The Lord will do it. Promise you that. So, let's keep going. In verse 16 it says, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my hand. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. Whew. So, whereas the butler had a great interpretation in his dream, the baker, on the other hand, had a very negative answer or interpretation of his dream. And what's happening in his dream, after 3 days, he's going to die. He's going to get hung. His head is going to be taken off of him. In verse 20, it says, and it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief baker. He lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief bakers among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into the Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So, Joseph was right. The interpretations came true. The butler came back into his position. The baker was hanged. But keep in mind, keep notice of this though. When Joseph gave the butler his interpretation, he said, listen, when this takes place, when you go back to your former position, remember me. Yo, I'm in here. I ain't do nothing wrong. Remember me. You can find a way to get me out of here, man. But what happened in verse 23? It said, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So, here or there you may come into some people that be like, hey, I got you. I can do this and that for you. I know what you're going through, or so forth. And we get our hopes up a little bit, thinking, oh, hey, well, maybe this is an opportunity to get out of what I'm dealing with. This is what I was waiting for, maybe. Hey, and then boom. It doesn't go as expected. What did we see? It said that yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So, we think this is maybe a little breakthrough, but it doesn't go through. Do we give up? No. We steady being patient. Because patience is a principal thing. If you don't got patience, you're not going to get through what you're experiencing. Let's keep going. We're going to go into chapter 41. Because we were looking at the tribulations of Joseph right here. Chapter 41, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. And it says, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So, after this took place, after the chief butler was restored, a whole 2 more years went by, and Joseph is still in prison. Think about that. You thinking this is your little breakthrough, but a whole 2 more years come before nothing has even happened. So, Pharaoh has a dream. In verse 2 it says, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. So you have 7 well-fed cows. And then behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. So Pharaoh had two dreams. In the first one, you had 7 cows that were well fed, and then you had 7 malnourished cows. So what happened is the 7 malnourished cows ended up eating the 7 well-fed cows. Now then he goes and have a second dream, and this one is regarding corn, but I'm not going to get into that. We're going to jump down to verse 14. And it says, then Pharaoh's, go before that. You can go to verse 8, and it says, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So Pharaoh had these dreams, and he's trying to figure out what does this dream mean, because he had 2 dreams and they're very similar, and he's like, man, this gotta mean something. But none of the magicians could interpret the dream. So then in verse 9 it says, then spake chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my fault this day. So now he's coming to remembrance that, hey, man, I should have been trying to help out Joseph. He interpreted my dream, so that's how you see the correlation here. This dude was able to interpret his dream, so he must be able to interpret Pharaoh's dream. But he says, I do remember my faults this day. So now, finally, 2 years later, that's a long time to forget. That is a long time to leave a brother hanging. I'm just letting you know. But, 2 years later now, Pharaoh has a dream, and the chief butler is like, now I remember what my faults today. So the chief butler is going to recommend Joseph to Pharaoh. Jump down to verse 14. And it says, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself, and changed his raiment, and came in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. So now he's recommended Joseph unto Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's asking Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I heard you can interpret dreams. So hey, I'm asking if you can do it. And Joseph said, and in verse 16 it says, and Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. So hey, you see within that self, he's humbling himself. He's like, man, I can't do it. It's God who give me the answers. That's something we need to keep in mind within ourselves too. Within these tribulations, within these trials, hey, it's God's hand that's getting you out of it, not yourself. That's where we being patient and letting God take control, not Cephas take control, or whoever you are. We don't control anything. God is in the works here. He's putting together a plan for you to get somewhere where you need to be that you didn't even know. But you need to go through it and not think I need to get out of it. You need to go through it. Not abort mission, but you got to sell it. Let's jump down to verse 25. And it says, so Pharaoh had ended up telling Joseph his dream. And in verse 25 it says, and Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. So even though Pharaoh had 2 dreams, Joseph is telling Pharaoh, listen, even though you had 2 dreams, they're both saying the same thing. It's according to one thing right here. Now jump down to verse 29. You had the 7 well-fed cows, and then you had the 7 malnourished cows. Then you had the dream with the corns also. But this is what it's meaning. In verse 29 it says, behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. So those 7 well-fed cows, that's representing 7 years of prosperity in your crops. You're gonna have a it's gonna be plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. You're gonna get some good food, a good amount of it, a great quantity. But right after that, you're going to experience a massive famine. It's going to take over the entire land. In verse 31, it says, and the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled onto Pharaoh twice. Like, this famine is gonna be so bad, God had to give you the vision twice. He really wanted you to get it. It is because a thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So Pharaoh had this dream, and Joseph was able to interpret it for him. So we see the story of Joseph as his brothers hated him. They were trying to kill him. They stripped him of his coat. Instead, though, threw him in a well or a pit. Took him out of the pit. Sold him to be a servant. Or he sold him to Ishmaelites, some merchants, and then the merchants sold him into Egypt to be servants. And then, after some time, even though experiencing all that, now he becomes the right hand man of his master. And things are looking good for him. Things are starting to look up. Then boom, his master's wife is trying to sleep with him. She's trying to sleep with him, still keeps nagging, trying to get at him. And then because he decided he wasn't going to do it, and he slipped up and lost his coat, left it in her possession, then she starts lying on him. She's lying on him, getting him in trouble, bringing it to her. She didn't have to do all that. But hey, it ended up that way. And Joseph didn't do anything wrong for all this to take place in his life. But as we kept reading, it continued to say the Lord was with him. So just like we're experiencing the things in our lives, when it starts to get rough, and then it starts to let up a little bit, and then get even more rough, guess what? The Lord is with us. So, because she lied on him, he ended up in jail. And he was in jail for at least 2 years. Then he finally, gets out and starts interpreting this dream for Pharaoh. And let's see the end result of that, because he was able to interpret the dream for Pharaoh. Let's keep reading verse 33. And it says, Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Because Joseph basically going to recommend to Pharaoh, listen, there's a certain way you need to divide your crops so that you have enough for the 7 years, and then you save up enough so that you can last through the extra 7 years of famine. Because you're going to have plenteous, because you're going to have enough for those first 7 years, then you're going to have extra to last you the other 7 years where you ain't going to get no form of vegetation. So you got to live off what you saved up. So now it says, let Pharaoh do this, and it says, now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Someone who's capable of doing that. It says, now therefore, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. So he's basically giving his spiel of how this is going to take place. But jump down to verse 37. And it says, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. So, man, Joseph was a wise individual. And that's something that we start to experience, or we start to retain from being patient, going through our tribulations. What do we get? We get wisdom. Because we're long suffering. We're not so quick to lash out. No, we sit back and let God take his course. And while you're doing that, God is giving you little bits of wisdom. He's dropping it in your state of mind. Because you ain't going to react to the situations as you did before. You're not. You're going to change your state of mind. You're going to be patient. You're going to be wise how you deal with one another. And they could see that in him. So verse 37, it says, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Now jump down to verse 41. And it says, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. So he just went from being in prison for at least 2 years. Now Pharaoh is setting him over all the land of Egypt. See everything he experienced just to get to that point? He's been in trouble almost all his life. Oh, for at least 13 years. Experiencing hell after hell. His brothers hating him. His master's wife trying to sleep with him. The chief butler forgetting about him. Like, that's a long time to forget about him for 2 years. And then now he's being brought out of the prison to interpret a dream. We're going to turn over to our next scripture, which is going to discuss that. We're going to turn over to Romans chapter 8. It's really going to be the last scripture, but we're going to read that now. Romans chapter 8. We're going to read one verse in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28. And it reads, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." So all things work towards good, whether it's good or bad. Because ultimately, if you keep reading about the story of Joseph, even though once he became ruler over all over all Egypt, right under Pharaoh, hey, later on during the famine, his brothers had to come down to Egypt seeking food because they were experiencing famine also. So they had to go to Egypt and get food. And guess what? Through Joseph, his family got the hookup. So all things, whether good or bad, work towards a greater good. It says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." Key characteristic, you gotta love God though. You gotta be patient. You gotta be willing to stick through it. If not, it's not gonna benefit you. You gotta be willing to endure it and have that patience. To them who are called according to his purpose. But let's turn over to James chapter 1. James chapter 1. I'm going to read the first 4 verses. James chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. And it reads, "James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are scattered abroad, greeting." So James is talking to the tribes of Israel who are scattered at this point. He's saying, "Greeting, my brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations." So in our temptations, we're supposed to call it joy. Verse 3 says, "Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." How do you get patience? You got to go through something. Something has to come your way where you got to take a step back and think to yourself, well, you know what? I can't act so quick. Let me take some time with this. That's your patience building right there. So it says, "Knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." And it really goes hand in hand, because when you're being patient, you're really growing your faith. At the same time, your trying of your faith is working patience. Your patience is building your faith, because you're being preserved, you're making it through, and God is right there at all times. So the God got me. Hey, he been here since the start. I ain't scared of nothing. The only one I'm afraid of is God. The only one I'm afraid of is God and giving up on him, because he ain't giving up on me. Think about that. But it says in verse 2, "My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptation." Be happy, because it's gonna be okay. But verse 4 says, "But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." And that's what patience will do for you. Let's turn over to our last scripture. 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1. I'm going to pick it up at verse 3. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3. And it reads, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to his abundant mercy hath begotten us again unto the lively hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." So, hey, he resurrected Jesus from the dead. Jesus got his glorious body back. Guess what? Same thing can happen for us. He's putting a lively hope within us by the simple fact that, hey, he resurrected Jesus. So Just like Jesus experienced his change, there's a change for us to come also. Now, verse 4 says, to an inheritance incorruptible, undefiled, and that fadeth not away, reserved in heaven for you. So this change in our bodies, this everlasting life, it's reserved in heaven for us. Meaning we don't have it right now. Meaning salvation is to come. Meaning we're not automatically saved. We gotta wait till the end to get this salvation. If you decide you want to draw back and not want to endure unto the end, because in Matthew chapter 24 and verse, I'm going to read it for you right now. Matthew chapter 24, verse 13. It says, I'll start at verse 12. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. So we got to endure unto the end. That requires patience. But the end of our patience, the end of all this, what we're striving for, what we're working towards, is an inheritance of this incorruptible and undefiled that fadeth not away. And it's reserved in heaven for us. We're waiting for it. But it's there. All we got to do is just wait. Stick with it. Don't give up. We have to endure. We have to be patient. And we can receive that. In verse 5 it says, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation in the last time, wherein ye greatly rejoice through now for a season. If need be, you are in heaviness through manifold temptations. Keep in mind, these temptations is for a season. It ain't forever. It's for a season. They come and they go. But ultimately, when the Lord gets back, all of us, we don't got to worry about it no more. We don't. But what do we have to do for the time being? It says, ye greatly rejoice through now for a season. Through what you're going through, if need be, you are in heaviness through manifold temptations. You gotta greatly rejoice. You gotta be happy when you're experiencing the good, just like you gotta be happy when you're experiencing the bad. Because it's all working towards a greater good. You're being patient, you're enduring to the end. In verse 6, or verse 7, it says that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of fire that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Like, think about it. It says that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perisheth. Think about gold. You know, it got to get beat up to get that necklace that you want. Silver, so forth. You know how you want it to look, the finished look? Look at us. We are not in our finished look. Our finished look is going to be in these everlasting godly bodies that we're going to be receiving at the coming of the Lord. So we got to be patient in order to get those. So he's likening it to gold. And it says we're much more precious than that. To us, gold is everything. But to God, man, gold ain't nothing. Shoot. When you get into the kingdom, the street's going to be of gold. Like, it's nothing to God. We're much more precious than that. And he is molding us and transforming us through these tribulations. But what do we have to do? Back to square one. We got to be patient through it. And at the same time, it says, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Verse 8 says, whom having not seen, ye love. We ain't seen Jesus, but we love him still. And it says, though now ye see him not, yet believing, ye rejoice with unspeakable joy, with unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. I hope you got some understanding. Gotta be patient, because there's a great reward after that. And ultimately, you gotta be patient through everything we face in life, because God is always with us, and we can't forget that. I hope you got some understanding. Peace.